So to explain how EM macros came about, it's best to show how basically I was using Blender. So we'll just Shift A and we'll just add this cylinder and I will SZ and we'll apply to scale. And the first thing I want to do is put a loop cut down here. And so we'll grab these faces, press E, cancel, Alt S to push them out. And then we'll do the same thing here and just kind of look at it from the front. And you know what, we'll E, Alt S, push this out as well. And you know, so far so good. However, you know, when it comes to the part of me adding spacer to this area, right? Like I want to press Control B, click E, right click cancel, Alt S, and push that in. That becomes, you know, a few more keystrokes. So if I want to do it here, then I'm pressing SC0, and then I'm pressing Control B, and then I'm E, Alt S to push it inwards. And that's kind of how you would handle dealing with this stuff with vanilla Blender. And then of course at the top you can choose to shade smooth. You can go to the normal area, turn on auto smooth, and everything's so far so good. So the next thing is we'll bring over a plane, and let's say I wanted to put some grates in this plane. That's something that I do all the time. What I'll do is put a couple of subdivisions in, and then I will, you know, nowadays I have to press spacebar and search for poke, and I'll poke the faces, and I'll press Alt J, which will give me a redirection of the geometry, and then I can press Alt I to inset, and then I can extrude it down, and basically I've created a knurl. So if I were to, you know, do the same thing and make it grate, I would tap into edit mode, right click a couple of times, subdivide, Shift R, repeat it, and then I would press, let's see, for this one, I just want to poke, and I want to go into vert mode, but I want to shrink my selection. So the thing about poking is you want to probably be in vert mode or something just to, all right, I guess I could poke it like so and then use the F9 to mess with it. But as you can see, these are a little bit of a process. So it's because of this that EM macros came about. Whenever I first was making hardops, the idea was to try to automate all the workflows that I was using at the time. However, over time, as I've begun to automate things, I've also begun to evolve more as an artist and the choices I make and the type of things I need. So now we have come to this point of EM macro. EM macro is located in the Q menu for edit mode. So we will tap into edit mode, and if we press Q, you can see EM macro here. Right now we'll just read the tooltip where basically left mouse clicking will grade it, control clicking will knurl it, shift clicking it will turn it into a panel edge, and alt clicking will turn it into a panel face. For emulate numpad users who are having issues, I also added to this version control shift to be an alternative to panel face, just in case you're using emulate numpad, which I don't personally use even on a laptop, but that is where you would locate EM macro. Each of these functions that are being listed here are actually part of the operations in edit mode under mesh tools. EM macro is merely the consolidation of these four classics into a more interactive version. So a fun way to show EM macro in action would be to take this cube and press X and delete it. We'll Shift A, insert a cylinder, and we'll look at this from front view, SZ3 to scale it up by 3 in edit mode because we don't want scale issues in object mode. I'll press Shift R and we'll put a loop cut just down here at the bottom, and we'll select this face area, and I will alt click EM macro in order to push this out. And we'll put another edge loop down here. We'll look at this from the front view, and we will just grab this area and press and actually alt click EM macro in order to push this out. We didn't want to knurl it. So now we are off to a good start. We'll grab these faces and just Control B, bevel them strongly, even against the wall up here. In fact, we can press Control B and then press C in order to clamp it to the nearest wall where it won't go any further. And then we could just select everything, and in vertex mode, just right click and choose merge by distance, and by removing those 5 verts we now have our continuous selection still. So we'll put another loop cut in here, SZ0 to flatten it, and this time we will shift click EM macro with this edge selected in order to just kind of add a cut in here, and we'll do the same thing here. except it doesn't go around to the other side. So I'll just select this, J to lightning bolt, SC0 to ensure that they're flat. And then with Q, we'll shift click EM macro. Let's try that again. Shift click. We're just bringing it down ever so gradually. Sometimes when my wallpaper changes, it causes a little bit of slowdown with my computer. So we'll just add a couple of loops here and then isolate this as a quad area. We'll press I to scale this in, inset it, and then we can just regular click to add some knurls here, or some grates in this case. So we got our grate faces here. We can sharpen this, see what we got so far, and then we can press Alt X. And modifier apply is similar to symmetry, except it basically will just put a modifier and then apply it, giving you the same result to symmetrize. So we'll shift click on this side, and then we'll click on this side to mirror it to the other side and end the mirror operation. You can also turn off close effort operation whenever you're in mirror in order to just make it just stay open. And then you can just right click to close it, of course. So with that, that is EM macro in a nutshell. Of course, we'll slap it with a blank material and we'll hit it with a sharpen, which, because my sharpen settings are set to mark crease and seam in my control tilde, that means that it marks it with seams, allowing me to press 3 and go into face mode. And I could just make selections and we can just slap a blank material on it. Do the same thing with this area. Hit it with a blank material. And right now we're just kind of looking at the clown colors of the viewport. So we'll see what we get afterwards. In fact, we'll hit that one with a blank material again, give it a more unique color. And we'll select this as well. And hit this with a blank material. And if we look at this in render mode, this is our result so far. We can mirror it, of course, up to the top, giving us a truer result. And I'll press Alt M, and we'll actually shift click for destructive material scroll, where we can actually scroll through the materials. And I'm just going to shift scroll through each index to find just the right material that, you know, shows the surface in a flattering light. Just one by one until we get everything right where we want it with these blank materials. And voila, we are done. So the next thing is to control click on bevel to just add a new bevel. But since there isn't a bevel present, we don't have to control click it. We can just click it, just add a bevel, press 1 to set it to a default profile of 0.5. And to fix some of this shading, we can alt click sharpen in order to add a weighted normal, and that should mitigate things. In order to fix this area, that of course is a battle with mesh torsion and the normal. So the easiest way for me to fix such things is to just quarantine the area a bit, mitigating these shading mishaps to be just in a particular region instead of all encompassing. But bevel on its own can be a rather strict auditor when it comes to simplistic geometry. So now we are looking at our kind of completed hose. And so let's say we actually wanted to deform this. Also, we see the bevel is a little overshot. So we could lower the bevel like so, roll the segment to try to fix the material transition. But what would probably be easier would be to actually go in here, select the face, Shift G, and we'll choose perimeter. Or let's try it again. Shift G. I believe it was a perimeter, but it looks like that might not be it. So we'll Alt Z to turn off see-through. And with 3 in face mode, we're just going to select this face region. And now we can actually draw a box around everything, but it's not going to select everything in the back. Selection can be a little odd when it comes to solid and see-through. So we'll press Shift H and hide everything. So the main thing is that our bevel is set to be limit method of angle. So I'll press L inside of B width to change that to weight, which doesn't appear to change anything. But if we were to select one of these, and if we look at Mark is a multi-tool, so alt-clicking it will actually allow us to adjust the weight. But if I press A, it'll actually allow me to deal with all the weights in a mesh, but Control A will allow me to deal with all the weights, period. So we're just going to lower the weight just of this particular region to something a little more reasonable. As you can see at the bottom, the number snaps to increments of point something. So right now we're at 0.1. Now we have our bevel set to 2 of what the global bevel is all around this thing. So despite a few small surfacing issues, this came out relatively good. The next thing from here is we may want to either deselect everything at this point and press Alt H to reveal everything, which will be selected. And if we press Shift H, we can actually hide what we previously had revealed. And what this means for us now is that we can say use Shift tilde for boundary loop selection, and we can grow our selection just slightly, and we'll actually just hide that as well. So we're just hiding the problem areas, so that way I can actually go under Mesh Tools and Dice, and we can just dice this with a few units, and we see that the dice didn't actually take with the area that is in question. So to wrap this up, because the next thing would definitely be talking about shading, but we can just scale out a curved circle. We'll select our object, select a circle, Control P, curve deform. Because of our position of our cylinder in the circle, it's not going to deform properly. So this is where you would press Control tilde, go in your helper, and locate this particular modifier. And for me, I actually like control scrolling to go through these dynamically to find the perfect parameter for my needs. And now we can just scale this out on the Z to make this bigger. We can also go in and use something like ST3 Array V2, which in this version, you can hold Shift and scroll up in order to move it up in the modifier stack, as it should be with most of our modals. But for some reason, the previous version of ST3 Array didn't have this functionality. So now it has been added into the V1 or the V2, and I just can't be happier to see it. So we're just getting our object to fit around, and we are done. So hopefully that's a pretty good overview about EM Macro and what it has to offer you inside of Blender and hardops. So the thing about EM Macros is it does require certain types of selections in order to function. So on this piece I modeled a while back, I'll just use it to show a couple of examples of how I use it. So right here you see me using knife tool to just kind of cut a line, and then I had Z cut through on, but it looks like half the mesh is mirrored. So I will just shift click EM Macro, which will bring it in, and we'll hold Control to just kind of pull that in. With all these modifiers, it can of course get a little bit heavy, but I just kind of wanted to show it in a project setting of how I use it. Sometimes if you're using like bisect mirror like I'm using, you're going to have to probably clean up some additional faces on the inside. But let's say I wanted to actually detail this particular area. So I'll press Alt W, switch over to box cutter. We'll use knife box, and I'm going to draw a box, but I'm going to hold Shift, so that way the box is constrained to be a square, and we'll just press space bar, and of course Blender will solve it as it will. And your first thought might be, oh cool, a quad. I might go ahead and just hit it with an EM Macro. But me personally, I tend to press I and put a little bit of buffer between myself and the macro that I use. So if I were to use grate, then we can see that with grate set to be insetted, that making it fit actually breaks the quad flow that's going around. So I tend to isolate those sort of things just in case I do want to simplify it by going in and just dissolving that completely out of the low. So these are just a couple of things I just wanted to go over. We'll switch over to Ngon for this next one. I don't know why I'm not using box cutter. I'll hold Control because I have Ngon permasnap, and now we can use permasnap without having to deal with the control behavior. Now that it's behaving right, and we'll just select both of these. Sometimes that empty makes me think there's a straight edge, and we'll just actually this time we'll select these 3 faces, and we'll alt click in order to use the face mode. So we could push it both ways. But one thing I did notice with EM Macro on the face push is that it is a lot more gentle on the face push than what I would normally get. So this is something that I'm still trying to understand about how this thing works, but I still have plenty of ideas for improvements. Now that it's been brought forward, I'm just happy to see it interactive now and getting the love that it deserves. So with this area, things are just getting a little tricky. The bevel's just a little too close. We could raise that, relax that area, which is better than lowering the width, but sometimes I'll just do both to ensure that things always go smoothly. But even for something like this, I could just go in here, just quickly knife, press Z, cut through, grab this. And, you know, things didn't actually work out here. You know, knife can be a tricky little devil sometimes. So you press Z before you even make your first cut. And then you get the full see-through capabilities, and we'll just alt click it again, bring this in. And of course, because there's a mirror in place, we're going to get some issues here, but I'm pretty vigilant about getting in there and actually dissolving and removing faces that are going to be problematic, which is important. I mean, hopefully over the time that you're using Blender, you become more keen on some of the things that happen, because, you know, there's definitely a pattern for it. If you do certain cuts, you can expect possibly certain results. So here I am in edit mode. I think I just destroyed some data over here. In fact, I definitely did. So we'll just hit that with the crease. I'm not sure what actually happened there. Let me go back one more. There we go. Now things are looking pure, and I'm just not even going to risk that. In fact, I am totally going to risk that. In fact, the easiest way to also do a knife project in the event that you're just wanting to just get it and be done, because, you know, there is a degree of overlap between Hops and Box Cutter, and that is because Hops approaches these things completely different, but still has its uses. So right here, we just performed our knife project. We'll press F to fill that face, except our color got changed. So I'm not sure what color it was, but we'll just return that. And I'll press I in order to inset this, but probably to inset this properly and get the result that I want, I'm going to need to make this quads in this first part. And that is because, you know, we need to subdivide the face, and we can't subdivide it if it's an Ngon in these cases. So now we can go in and we'll actually use Neural, which didn't get his chance to shine today, but still a favorite. And let's try that actually one more time. With all these modifiers, I can definitely see it getting a little bit performant. So I will see about having a mode where the modifiers can be toggled off during the operation. But I just wanted to show a little bit of how I use EM macros in action. Hopefully this has shed a little bit more light on it and kind of how you can use it and deal with some troubleshooting with it on the fly. A fun way to play with EM macros is first we'll delete this cube, just add a cylinder, scale it down, apply to scale, go in edit mode, shift R, and we'll put a few edge loops in here, switch to vertex mode, and we'll just control click EM macro to go to grate or to go to neural, and we'll just roll it once and hold control to move it back and get more of our shape back, and click to apply, and then we'll grab this piece and alt click in order to move it up. And we could either hold Alt to add a boundary loop, which I didn't actually want in this case, but we could press S, which will allow us to shrink it in. And I guess we can actually keep that boundary loop. We'll just grab it and just extrude this inwards like so. And just hit it with a sharpen, maybe shift click sharpen to just bring this down into auto smooth a little bit to give us a nicer boundary. In this case, we may need to select this edge and just sharpen it. We can look at it from top view and just draw a box. In fact, we may want to start off the mesh in order to prevent alignment issues. And we'll just bring that shape down, keep it live. Our 3D cursor is still in the center, so that means that if we go under Mesh Tools in the Q menu and we control click Radial Array, we'll radial array around that, and we're done. So I just wanted to show just kind of some quick uses of EM macro in action. So let's say you have this shape, you have this top that's made of a big Ngon, right? And you know you need a quad flow in order to get your EM macro to go. So we'll just go into dice and we'll just move the axes. We'll also add Y to it as well, or I guess Z in this case. And we'll just click to apply that. And now we actually have this face that we can just play off of. So I'll just scale it up, maybe inset it, and we'll just control click. Actually, I didn't want to make it a piece. I wanted to control click it with EM macro in order to just quickly put a neural at the very top of this thing. So I just wanted to show just kind of some of the ways you can force a flow to exist if it doesn't actually exist. Like, for example, we can come in here and just fill this with a quad, and we could go into dice. And now that dice is able to work on individual faces, you can just go in and actually force a flow where you need it, and then just, I would inset the face in order to avoid breaking up the area outside of it. And bam, you can just get in and just cut detail where you need. However, messing with dice this way does give me the idea for something called free dice, where it could be a version of dice that's just basically allows for users to choose where they want to set the lines. I see that we may have missed over that, so something I'll be checking into. Four of the oldest, most classic tools in hardops have been revived for this version. So to show them in action, I'm in edit mode right now. So I'm going to go into face and I'm just going to inset this face. And we'll press Q and go under operations and we'll go under mesh tools. And the first one I'll show you is great face. And when we just click it, that's it. It just does great face. There's no options in the F9. This tool was one of the things I wrote when I was first learning hardops. And basically the idea is that it turns a grate into a face. And then afterwards you press Alt S. In fact, I'll undo that and we'll subdivide it a couple of times just so I can show how I used to use this back in the day. I would go here and just grate the faces and then I would just press Alt S and I'd push it in, and that would actually suffice for my needs. In fact, I'll press I to inset this face. And the reason I'm insetting is because these break the connections geometrically and I don't want to cause issues there. The next one is knurl. So if we use knurl, all it does is just sets us up like so. In fact, we can subdivide it a couple of times and we can just knurl it, which will give us these points on the inside, and that is it. And so the next one I want to show is panel. So the easiest way to show this one is to actually use box cutter and to just cut a blue box in here, and we will just go and choose panel face, and that's all it does. Panel face just does that, and there's no options for it. These tools were written by me. It's kind of a meme almost, is that some of the worst parts of hops were made by me, and so I'm always trying to get them rewritten to be the versions that I envisioned them to be. And so the final one is edge, and so all this does is just turns the selection into an edge, and there's no F9 to adjust it, and it was called entrench back then, and that was it. It basically did nothing. So now I want to introduce you guys to the new version. So jumping over into 2.9, which I have the latest hops in for no particular reason, we'll press I on this top face just to give us a quick face, and we'll jump into EM macro, which first will default to face grate. And so by rolling the wheel, you can see that I'm able to dynamically change this on the fly, which is just great. Moving the wheel will allow me to look down into it and further sync it. Holding control will allow me to choose how tight the edges are on the area that I seek to create. And that is basically the new face grate in a nutshell. So the next one I want to showcase in the EM macro is control clicking, which will bring up knurl. So if we control click it, you can see that I'm now able to scroll the wheel. I'm able to move knurl both in and out, which is handy on the fly to be able to just quickly knurl something. And click to apply. We'll take this face, we'll press I, and we'll take a look at the third one, which is shift clicking to turn it into an edge. And if we shift click it, we can see that we've now turned the selection into a panel edge. And so we're able to just move the mouse in order to just quickly adjust this. We can hold control and adjust this. Of course, there's more options over here on the side in case that you're wanting to have more fun with these particular tools and their behaviors that are available. That's also more possible through the help. I do plan on doing dedicated content on this stuff in the future. So the final one I want to show is the new face panel. So I'll just cut a box in here, but I'll press Control X to turn this into a knife, and we'll just cut a box in, and we'll just select these two faces, and we'll alt click EM macro in order to push this out on the face. And so these tools were made for very basic purposes long ago. So the modal versions are pretty much just that being expanded upon for this new generation, because these tools have never really received any sort of integration updates as time has went on. So this is now them being brought to 21st century. In fact, extruding things via this way is my favorite way to do extrusions now, especially compared to the classic way of pressing E, right clicking, and pressing Alt S in order to push it out, which will get you something a little bit more wayward. However, by just going in and just alt-clicking EM macro, I'm able to just extrude these faces, get exactly as I want, and continue on working. So I hope that you at least give it a try. It's something that I use a lot to just quickly, rapidly detail things. In fact, we can just delete this, bring in a cylinder, and add a couple of loops in. Maybe switch this over to face mode, select all of these, and we will just control-click to turn this into some knurls. And bada bing, bada boom. So that's really all there is to it. And then of course we can just hit it with a sharpen at the end and get it looking exactly how we want. Of course, the geometry that you give it is going to determine your result. So we could go for something a little bit more square-like here and actually just control click it in order to get something a little bit more unique. However, we will want to be careful with it because it is easy for this tool to get a little bit out of control since it is a modal operating on mesh data. So you do want to kind of use it with care and give it a little bit of practice before integrating into your general workflow. But it is something that I wanted to bring to you guys for the longest, and I'm glad that it's finally been rewritten the way that it's always deserved.